Useless Monster by Mute Crows, Chapter 7, or Chapter 6. The 2 weeks following the exams had Izuku working harder than usual at his work and at school. He had free time with his usual training with Yagi on pause until he finished getting things settled with the staffing process at UA. He even managed to land a new job as a vendor in the local metro station, which offered tips if he did well on sales. It wasn't a standard thing, but the vendor owner was American and liked to keep the tip concept as an incentive on making more sales. The days had started to blur together somewhat, and he was starting to just sleep at the beach, the breeze off the ocean relaxing and comforting in a way that left him feeling safe. Especially after school days with Bakugo getting rougher in his bullying after taking Izuku's attendance of the entrance exams as an act of direct defiance to the self-crafted throne he was so proud of. When he wasn't working, he was napping or sleeping, body still slowly recharging after the nitro boost recovery girl had given his healing. He was working on minimum calorie intake still. Honestly, he had started to lose track of the days, tasks blurring together as he worked through rote survival basics from the day to day. The afternoon sun on the beach was his favorite time and place to nap. It was just warm enough to be comfortable in the late winter chill. And that's how Yagi found him on the day they were supposed to be meeting again. Sitting against the wall that was heated by the day, curled protectively over his backpack and dirtier than he tended to be. His sleeves had been rolled up to his shoulders and arms covered in grease from cleaning up a motor shop on the far side of the city. He flinched awake when Yagi sat next to him with a gentle huff. "Oh, it's been 2 weeks already, Yagi-san?" Izuku blinked a few times before using his shoulder to rub sleep from his eye. The question got him a concerned look.
"Have you been overworking yourself, Izuku? Usually you have a better grasp of time than I do."
When he didn't respond, Yagi turned towards him more.
"My boy, are you okay?"
"As okay as I can be. Recovery girl's quirk took a lot out of me."
"She did not give you those gummies to help avoid this exact issue?"
She did, but I was saving them for when I might really need them." Yagi leveled him with a look that had him staring at his bag, shoulders curling a bit in shame.
"Izuku."
"Yagi-san, I have a bit more to worry about than being a little tired." It sounded snappy to his own ears, and he winced at the tone. He hadn't intended for it to come out like that. The man sighed softly before reaching into his pocket, pulling out an envelope and offering it to Izuku. He looked at it a moment before carefully taking it and putting it in his bag. He was excited to have finally received it, but he wanted to open it on his own. "Thank you."
"Of course, my boy,
He sighed again and ran a hand through his hair.
Can I ask you something?"
Izuku looked up at him, nodding and giving him his full attention.
"Why didn't you tell me you were homeless? After all of this time, I could have helped you and your mother."
He sounded hurt, and that hurt Izuku a bit. It hurt him even more to know that he would have only learned this through his files at UA, and he forged his mother's signature on those. He has been forging her signature since a child. No one actually knew she was missing anymore. Izuku smiled weakly, a broken laugh bubbling up. "There's only me left, Yagi-san."
What?"
Distress was coming off of Yagi in a surging current that bowled over Izuku. "I haven't seen my mom since I was like 6. She just disappeared. I've been homeless ever since." Izuku clutched his bag to his chest and turned away from Yagi, not wanting to talk about his circumstances any further. He could tell that he wanted to press the subject, but he thankfully didn't, probably not wanting to risk Izuku closing himself off more. He could practically feel the urge to question.
Would you like to get some hot chocolate and cookies, my boy? There is a small bakery nearby."
He smiled at the question. "Sure, Yagi-san." The bakery was warm and welcoming. They didn't even talk much while they waited, Izuku sinking into the comfortable bench and relaxing. Yagi ordered for both of them, and when Izuku wrapped his hands around the warm cup, he gave a small smile to his mentor. "Did your weeks go well? How did the other teachers feel about All Might joining the staff?"
Well, not everyone was happy, to say the least."
He ran a hand through his hair before taking a sip of his drink.
"I can understand why, though."
Izuku gave him a prompting look, which got a huff of laughter out of him.
"The media is going to be all hands on deck to work as much information as they can out of UA about All Might, my boy. It comes with the status, as bothersome as it can be.
I feel like it's not going to be just the media trying to get information about you. The whole social build is going to shift a bit. You have your limit, and unless you are gonna come forward about your whole... He gestured vaguely in Yagi's direction. Situation, that means the hero world is going to have to fill in the spaces used up by school hours. A vacuum of power is going to show up, and that means that either other heroes will have to quickly step in, or the villains the world cuts so black and white will take advantage of the gap. I've seen it happen plenty of times. This kind of surprised look from Yagi. It wasn't often Izuku spoke unprompted about his experiences. He shuffled his feet absently under the table. Living homeless means people tend to ignore you. It's just how things work. So when people don't pay attention to your simple existence and you know how to wander in the dark like it's a familiar room, you see the smaller shifts in power. Turf wars that pass in silence because the people at large aren't listening. A man getting lynched as a way to overthrow the unwanted head of control. I've even seen parents drop off kids and not come back, too afraid of the responsibility, I guess. It all happens unseen, unnoticed. That's how back streets and the underground has worked, and will most likely continue to work.
Izuku,
I'm just saying what I know. We are built by our experiences. Izuku set his focus on his drink, not wanting to carry the topic he had started anymore. He hadn't intended to bring it up this way, it just happened.
That may be so, but we also are not powerless to shape the way we are built by said experiences. Perspective and outlook can go a long way, even if they're hard to control.
Izuku hummed in response. His mother used to say something similar. Did you get to finish your files and paperwork for UA? It was a clear change of subject direction, but Yagi just smiled and went with it. They finished their snack and continued to just exist in the vague vicinity of each other. Yagi would ask about school and his health, and Izuku just asked about whatever came to mind, like what some of the stranger fights he has had were like, or what his favorite pastime was. It was simple, falling back into routine as a way to reestablish a balance neither had realized was skewed over such a short time. When they did part ways an hour or two later, Izuku was feeling a little more energized. He wandered aimlessly for a bit, eventually coming to a train station with no visible occupants. Sitting on the bench in the empty plaza, the station apparently in one of its few and short closings, Izuku opened his letter. He wasn't sure how to react to the small metal disc that flashed to life, displaying the man he had parted ways with not even a few hours ago. The larger-than-life gusto of All Might on screen was so clashing with the person he had come to know in a strange way. The testing results were explained. He passed the written with flying colors. The physical, that girl he saved came and spoke in favor of him to Mike, a fact that made him a little nervous because he wasn't sure how quickly the man would connect the monster and his quirk. He got 70 points total in the physical exam, all rescue points crossing the entire board, which put him miraculously in 4th place on the grand scale of the entrance exams. He felt his eyes water at the sheer pride in Oman's voice as he praised his skills, the way he ranked so high on rescue points alone, and the man visibly beaming on screen. It was apparently incredibly rare someone made it in, especially so high on the charts, with rescue points alone. When the large hand reached towards him on screen, the tears fell as he smiled shakily. He did it! He actually did it! He had a shot at being a hero, at being more than a monster! Something that gave him so much hope, he wasn't sure what to do with it all! After class the next day, Izuku rushed to UA to drop off his tuition payment. The fact that he could finally put the money where it was meant to go had it metaphorically weighing him down while he continued to hold it. The trains were on time as usual, and he made it to the UA offices and back to the park where he would usually meet with Yagi on this day of the week, only 20 or so minutes late. Yagi was standing patiently by a tree, bikers and joggers passing by steadily with a bag in hand. He looked up with a smile when Izuku approached.
There you are! You were later than your usual time, Reg.
Sorry, Yagi-san, I was turning in my tuition payment. He had a small proud smile as he spoke. He was finalizing his achievement with that payment, and it meant so much to have actually made it there. Izuku gestured to the bag in Yagi's hand. What's that?
A gift.
Izuku looked confused, but accepted it as Yagi held it out for him. He opened the bag to find a clean, still packaged, UA uniform inside.
For your brilliance and kind heart, my boy. You continue to impress me every day.
He grinned at Izuku, who was still giving the uniform a stunned look. I don't know how I could possibly thank you, Yagi-san, for everything that you've done for me. Izuku wiped at his watery eyes. Yagi laughed as he patted his shoulder, taking the lead as they walked the path around the park together.
Just continue to grow and learn. That's all I ask.
Izuku gave him a firm nod. He didn't intend to let him down. Grab, grab, grab! Izuku was running as fast as he could without getting in trouble. Out of Orudera, the principal had called him and Bakugo into the office for some congratulatory speech on making it into UA that, while a kind gesture, had set Izuku on a timer! The timer being Bakugo's temper flaring and rising with every moment that passed as he sat in class for the day to end. Bakugo had a thing about keeping up a technically clean written record. Anything else could possibly ruin his chances to get into UA or something like that. So, Izuku had to get off of campus before Bakugo and also get out of sight before Bakugo saw him to follow him. The instant his foot hit outside the gates, he takes up at a sprint. But it's too late! Yaku! Bakugo shout is just barely restraining his rage. People could hear after all. Crap! He whipped around a street corner and wished desperately that he had the courage to just shift in public for once so that he could get away even faster. He could hear Bakugo letting loose a string of insults and curses as he skidded around another turn. Get back here, useless! The crackle of a cork use that followed the roar was the nail in his coffin. Bakugo was on him in a literal flash of light and throwing him into a walkway between a building and a fence that Izuku had, of course, managed to be near. Fate seemed to work against him like that when it came to Bakugo. Gotcha, please! Izuku scrambled backwards a bit as he fumbled to get both up and away. The nickname was a reflex from years of use. The nickname was a mistake! Bakugo roared and his hands lit up with flame from more detonations. Izuku flinched hard. This was way more aggressive than any previous power trip or whatever Bakugo approached it as. I'm so sorry. Shut up! Bakugo grabbed his collar and shoved him into the wall. What trick did you pull to weasel into my school? He tried to pull out of his grip only to be slammed into the wall again by scalding palms. This was supposed to be my legacy! A punch. Izuku wheezed at the impact, brain unable to process this as actually actively happening. UA is my stepping stone! Another punch. You are not even with a footnote or passing word in my story! Another, quickly followed by a burning explosion against his side. I told you to learn to blaze, Deku, and this is what you do! The burns were getting bigger, deeper the longer Bakugo ranted. Tears streamed down Izuku's face as he tried to claw his grip away. The smell of burnt polyester and skin was getting stronger. He felt the strap of his backpack snap and the weight of it go lopsided on his shoulder, dropping to the ground. He couldn't get a word out as Bakugo pulled him from the wall and threw him down the walkway more and spit at his feet. Izuku felt his head crack against the ground and his vision blank for a beat. His ears were screaming at him and he could see Bakugo saying something else before turning and leaving, kicking dirt onto his broken bag as he walked past it. Izuku just laid on the ground and cried. He couldn't feel half of his burns, which he knew was bad. The ones he could feel were searing heat in contact with the air his clothing ruined. He stayed where he was long past when he should have gone to work. Stayed past when he would have been meeting up with Yagi. Some people walked past the alley but didn't even cast him a glance as he stayed on the ground. When he did get up, he rolled over and vomited up the small amount of food he had eaten during the day. He wheezed at the way his bones creaked, choking on a bit of bile that he spit out. He may have fractured some ribs again if the painful streaks of electric static were anything to base it on. He felt the way his muscles pulled at his cooked flesh, the charred surface of some spots, leaving him in shock that he really did experience that. That a person he thought he could trust in the end would twist around and do this. That the usually tolerably rough bullying would go this far. He limped towards his bag and picked up the one existing strap. He had no idea where to go, truly. So he wandered to the only place that he could think of that would accommodate what he knew he needed to do. The top floor of an apartment complex that was being built a few kilometers away. It had floors and ceilings as well as the outer walls, so he would be protected from the elements. All he had to do was get into the building without anyone noticing, so he could shift. It was already rippling under the surface from the burns anyway. not pushing, but making its existence as an option known. The monster always healed faster, more efficiently. It felt like a sick joke about reality. The filth and beastly creatures that thrive in the shadows always bounce back. The heroes work hard, but the villains always resurface, new and improved, or however you wanted to look at it. Entropy always dictated that the system always falls out of order. He looks for cameras, but can't find any. No one is standing around or passing on the street either, so he took his chance and circled the building for a possible entrance. One of the windows had a tarp over it, not fully installed yet. He climbed through as gently as he could. His burns pulled at the edges and blisters tingled. A dribble of blood ran down his skin and hit the singed edge of his shirt, the skin around the heavier burns tearing at the stretch. Izuku looked around at hollow floors, studs, and wiring spreading the length of the floors. He took a shaky breath, pulling his ruined shirt up to keep blood from dripping. His body throbbed almost sluggishly as he looked around for the nearest set of stairs. The climb to the top floor had him getting more and more weary. Standing in the middle of the floor, he looked around and set his bag down. There was less walling studs on this floor, just the main supports. He sat down gently, laying on the cold cement, and fumbled to release his grip, thoughts fuzzy with what was probably shock. He had the sweat, rapid breathing, and mild confusion for it. It was probably the only thing keeping the panic at bay if he was honest with himself, which he wasn't. It hurt. The speed of the change tore his skin, snapped his fractured ribs, left his vision swirling as he threw up more. He had a detached thought about how the point was to go unnoticed, and here he was bleeding and vomiting on the floor. Izuku looked himself over, seeing the damage better now that he could bend around to see all sides of him. The fur on this form was singed or completely missing where the burns sat. The edges of the burns peeled back and blood ran sluggishly down his arms, thick and dark. Izuku lifted an arm slightly, stopping when he felt more of his body tear away from itself. Tears ran unbidden and untouched as he rolled once away from the vomit. He was hoping to sleep eventually, but the pain was not just physical and deep-seated. He closed his eyes and tried to focus on just not crying. The whimpers and shaking breaths muffled with the fear of being found. Every sound outside the building had him flinching, irritating his ever so slowly healing body. The night passed, and he got no rest. The tears continued steadily and silently. His mind was the equivalent of white noise as he stared blankly at the stairs, antenna resting forward so as to hear if and when someone came into the building. The sun rose and moved across the sky. No one entered the building, and Izuku didn't bother to move. He wouldn't be able to do anything this injured anyways. He dozed instead, jerking awake at every sound. He doesn't eat. The second day left him well enough that he wasn't actively tearing his skin open with basic movement. So he shifted back, ignoring the way his body cried in pain shortly before school. He peeled away the ruined uniform, hissing at the way his skin left with it where the polyester had melted. Izuku put on the cheapest long-sleeved undershirt he had in his bag and decided that he would just have to see what his school did about him breaking uniform. He held on to the one strap on his bag and left the building as discreetly as he could. The answer is nothing at all. Not one staff member questioned the uniform break, generally ignoring him like usual. None of them even called on him in class as he zoned entirely out of every lesson, mind buzzing as he could only focus on Bakugo, watching his every move, no matter how small. Every time the boy spoke, he fought not to flinch. Bakugo doesn't even do anything in his direction the whole day, but it has Izuku even more on edge as he tries to guess when he might snap. School ends quietly. He doesn't even attempt going to his jobs, body heavy and stomach empty. He wanders towards a small shop with cheap snacks and buys a small meal. He didn't have much cash on him now that he had paid the tuition fees for UA, and having not worked for 2 days meant that he was running out of his payment-to-payment living stash. He finds a different place to attempt sleeping as his monster form again. He wanted to heal cleanly. Scars can lead to questions, especially when visible. The next day is spent the same, as is the next, except he is out of cash now and resorts to eating the stamina gummies that he had saved from the exam. The 5th day has Bakugo glaring at him the whole day, a disgusted look on his face. It leaves Izuku's skin like static, painfully so, as he tries to simultaneously ignore and keep watch on him. His hidden burns screamed violence unheard to the people around him. During class change, a classmate attempts to pick up some form of verbal bullying that just rolls off of him.
Trying to size up how badly he's gonna kick your butt, huh?
The guy grins at him. Izuku blinks and finds his voice rough from days of not talking. Bakugo isn't what I'm thinking about. A mild lie. He turned back to his desk and ignored the surprised look on the kid's face. He was constantly thinking about Bakugo in some way, now hypervigilance putting him on edge much more than normal. Afraid of slipping up again and suffering more before he can finish healing completely. The thing is that he was also thinking about how he had just vanished from contact with Yagi. Izuku had no phone or other means of contacting the man. He could only hope that he could find him at one of their meeting places. He didn't want to stress or worry his mentor, but he also knew that this unplanned absence was likely doing so anyways. When the school day ended, he wandered to the beach, accepting that he likely lost the jobs he had and not wanting to show up to them anyways without the strength or energy to work in the first place. He pulled on his backstrap and looked for Yagi, though it would technically be a few hours until their usual meeting time. The sun sat low when he finally saw the hero quickly walking up the beach, visibly distressed even from a distance. Izuku turned towards Yagi and felt the moment that he was spotted, since it had Yagi's lungs burning with the tears in the tissue. He didn't grab it. He had too much. His body was still focusing on cleaning up to take on any more. The blatant worry and concern on Yagi's face made his heart hurt. His throat tightened.
Izuku, well, how about... What happened, my boy?
He held his hands up as if to touch Izuku, but froze at the way he had tensed up at the motion. His face flashed through emotions that Izuku couldn't pick apart, not with his eyes already watering like they were. Yagi-san? Izuku choked on his tears as he stepped forward and just pressed his forehead against his chest. He let his burnt and beaten old bag drop to the ground. Hands gently rested on him, one on his head and the other between his shoulders. Yagi's cautiously careful contact only made his chest twist and emotions swirl. He had been in his monster form so much lately that he felt undeserving of the kindness. He knew what Yagi thought of his other form. He knew he didn't see him any differently. Yet it still felt sour, it still felt wrong. The way the world sees him in that form still holding far stronger influence than a few kind words.
It's going to be okay, Izuku. I am here.
Yagi's voice was soft and warm, an offering of comfort. Izuku raised his hands and shakily grabbed onto his shirt, fingers digging into the fabric as he did so. He grabbed onto his only stable source of support and let himself feel the grief of losing something he never had. He let out a shaking sob and cried.